Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? Today I'm going to tell you about a car that comes with an engine that, few people talk about these days, but these cars are not only cheap, they're also reliable, have good horsepower and torque, and they get very good gas mileage. Now, when I mention this car, some of you that are watching this video, and to be specific, probably the younger generation, or even more specific, the younger generation that watches a lot of Scotty Kilmer videos is going to think that I'm talking about the worst car ever built, but that's simply not true. That's just simply you being unfamiliar with the engines on these cars, the different series of these engines, and then what years are the reliable ones, what years aren't, what you can do to make sure these engines stay reliable, all that good stuff. There's a lot of nuance, but trust me, if you pay attention to this video, you are going to be able to find a deal out there. These cars cost, in some instances, less than 50% of what a Toyota Camry with the similar engine would cost. They even get a better gas mileage too. And this car is none other than a 2004 to 2008 Pontiac Grand Prix that comes with a 3.8 liter V6 naturally aspirated engines. These engines produce 200 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque, and the curb weight on these cars is 3,484 pounds. And to be specific, we're talking about the third series 3.8 liter naturally aspirated engine that are on these cars. These cars also have an option for a 3.8 liter supercharged engine. Now those engines produce 260 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. Now, not that the 3.8 liter supercharged engines aren't reliable, but simply put, supercharged and turbocharged engines, due to simply the fact that they're forced induction and more components involved, more heat involved, tend to not be as reliable as a naturally aspirated engine. So yeah, the third series naturally aspirated 3.8 liter engine on these cars, in my opinion, is probably bar none the most reliable V6 engine GM has ever made. In fact, maybe it's the best V6 engine the entire American car industry has ever made. Now, some of you might have had a poor experience with the 3.8 liter V6 GM engines, but those were probably the second series engines that you had a bad experience with. We'll get to those engines and what cars they come in and what are the specific problems with those engines and how you can go about remedy them if you were to buy a car with a second series 3.8 liter engines, because those are still reliable. However, you need to know what you're doing, what needs to be fixed, all that good stuff. We'll get to those later in this video. All right, so for starters, these engines come with a timing chain. For those of you that don't know, timing chains do not have to be replaced at a certain interval, unlike a timing belt. Timing chains usually last for the entirety of the life of the vehicle or the engine, unless there's some sort of a defect with the timing chain guides that wear out too quickly, or maybe the timing chain tensioner. However, these 3.8 liter naturally aspirated engines do not have any of those problems, and usually the timing chain lasts for way more than 200,000 miles. Now let's compare that to one of the most reliable cars in the world, in my opinion, which is the, let's say, 2005 Toyota Camry with a 3.0 liter V6 engine. Those engines come with a timing belt that has to be serviced at a certain time interval. However, those engines are non-interference engines, which means if the timing belt breaks, the valves won't hit your piston and completely damage your piston. However, you're going to be left stranded on the side of the road. Plus, replacing the timing belts at certain intervals is obviously somewhat of a costly repair. Now here's the interesting part. Even as far as the gas mileage goes, these Grand Prix get 20 miles per gallon in the city and 30 miles per gallon on the highway. Compare that to the same 2005 Toyota Camry with the V6 engine. They get 20 miles per gallon in the city as well, but they get 20 miles per gallon on the freeway. Now, as far as horsepower and torque, in my opinion, it's a bit of a wash. I mean, the Grand Prix gets about 200 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque, whereas the 05 Camry with the V6 gets 210 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque. So yeah, the third series 3.8 liter V6 on these cars is very solid. It does not have any common problems or chronic issues. The transmission on these cars is also very good and reliable as well, as long as you do the maintenance on time and take care of it. Now, there are a couple of minor problems on these cars, mostly minor electrical issues, just like on any car that I'm going to mention. First, there's a very high failure rate of the blower motor resistor. This is an easy fix, as some of you may know. Sometimes there's a problem with the door locks not working. You might have to replace the ignition switch on these cars. And also there's a known problem with carbon buildup in the throttle body that sometimes may keep your car from starting. Again, fixing that is not very difficult. Get some throttle body cleaner, clean that stuff up. And of course, all of these pale in comparison to the unintended acceleration problem that the 2005 Toyota Camrys had. So yeah, some of you might be shocked, but yeah, even Toyota has problems. You get the wrong make and model and year Toyota, you might run into as much problem as you would get if you were to buy a Chrysler. As far as what other GM products came with the 3 Series 3.8 liter engine, well, the 05 to 2009 Buick LaCrosse had these engines. Also 06 to 08 Buick Lucernes had these engines as well. But those cars have even slightly more electrical issues than the Grand Prix. So if you're looking for just reliable, Grand Prix is probably your pick. Alright, next talk about the second series 3.8 liter naturally aspirated engines that GM made, and the one that you might have had a problem with. And if you did, you've probably been pulling out your hair listening to me praise the third series 3.8 liter V6. Now those engines came on a bunch of vehicles. They came on 96 to 2005 Buick Park Avenues, 97 to 2004 Buick Regals, 96 to 99 Buick Rivieras, 97 to 2003 Pontiac Grand Prix, and 2000 to 2005 Chevy Impalas. And those 3.8 liter V6s had major problems with their intake manifolds. They had a problem with the upper and lower intake manifolds failing. When the lower intake manifold failed, it would leak coolant into the engine, not into the combustion chamber, but into the oil pan. You would see, that milkshake that you see when you have a bad head gasket where oil and coolant mix. A lot of poor mechanics back in the day would misdiagnose that, think they have a bad head gasket. They start replacing things that they weren't supposed to. The other problem was the upper intake manifold. On one corner it was close to the EGR. The heat from the EGR would melt or damage the upper intake manifold, and then you would have a leak from there. That leak would end up being an internal leak if you left it untreated, where coolant would leak into the combustion chamber. Early on it would burn with the air fuel mixture and go out the tailpipe where you see some smoke. If you left it untreated, and if it got worse, it would be enough to hydrolock your engine and totally destroy your engine. Now, about 6 years ago, if I remember correctly, I did a video about fixing this issue. Basically, if you want to fix these problems, you need to replace your intake manifold gaskets. There's also 2 elbows that are on the side of the engine that are made out of plastic. They also crack and start leaking after 100,000 miles or so. You upgrade those to aluminum ones. These are all readily available at your local auto parts store. This was such a common problem that you have no problem mentioning to any auto parts store. They'll know exactly what kit to give you. So yeah, if you do that, you basically are going to have the same reliability as the third series 3.8 liter. And in fact, in the third series 3.8 liters, that's exactly what they upgraded. They upgraded the upper intake manifold to completely aluminum. They upgraded the intake manifold gaskets. They replaced those elbows. So the problems that they had with the second series, as far as those coolant either leaking into the engine or into the combustion chamber, never happened to the third series V6 engines. On Craigslist, I was able to find a Grand Prix, an 06 Grand Prix, for $2,500 with about 135,000 miles on it. Now, if you were to buy a Toyota Camry V6 around the same year range with the same mileage, you're probably looking to pay at least 60, 70, 80%, maybe even double that. So I'm not claiming that it's going to be more reliable than a Toyota Camry. However, it is going to be a very reliable car. And when you consider how much you're saving up front, maybe you don't even have that much money to buy a Toyota Camry. That's how much you can afford. This is a good choice if you have $2,000, $2,500. No one wants a Grand Prix. It's not a pretty car. It's not a cool car. To a lot of people, it's not known for being reliable. So yeah, depending on your budget and your own personal preferences, that's for you to decide. Now, if a Grand Prix is out of the question for you, here's links to a video I did on some reliable cars that might interest you. In this corner, I'll put a link down below to another video, and also links to other videos down below in the description box. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, bell notification. You leave a comment or suggestions down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.